This story begins with a shrill cry to calm down. The cry is so loud that the birds are frightened and fly away from the great cathedral in different directions. It can be heard even outside the cathedral. A young girl dressed as a priestess tells someone that everything is fine. Everything is fine. They are not on the battlefield. You can relax. Sweat runs down her face from fright, and someone's scarred hand is next to her. Above her stands a stocky boy, his back and arms all scarred and scarred. The walls and floor all around are covered with impact marks and cracks, and there is a broken tea set on the floor. The boy's face is distorted with a grimace of hatred and aggression. The veins on his neck are swollen. His eyes glow with purple light, and he literally growls at the girl like some wild beast. The girl is not afraid of him. She resolutely and confidently looks this beast in the eyes and gathers her strength without looking away. She thinks it's bullying, of course, but she has to deal with it. While the boy continues to growl menacingly at her, the girl gently moves her hand to the area of his stomach and casts healing magic. This makes the aggressive guy look away from her for a moment. The girl continues to cast her spell, and the glow of her magic spreads throughout the room, blinding everything with gold. The guy relaxes a little. His veins are no longer visible, and there's no aggressive expression on his face. In a few moments, the boy falls forward exhausted, right into the arms of the priestess, who does not look at all happy about this turn of events. She thinks that this time he managed to control his attack. She pats the boy on the arm, still with a sarcastic expression on her face, and ironically congratulates him on his achievement. This time, he managed to calm down a full 10 seconds earlier than last time. The guy continues to stand motionless next to her, leaning his head against the wall. The priestess's face becomes displeased, and she angrily asks if he could finally get away from her. The girl almost literally asks the guy to get off his feet, pushes him away with her hands as far as she can, which is difficult given his physique. In response, she hears a confused but stubborn no. The priestess thinks that he has taken up his own business again. Meanwhile, the guy raises his head. Now he looks like a cute little puppy and looks at the girl with pitiful eyes. The priestess sighs, thinking that this puppy can never just pick up and say what it wants at any given moment. Confused, she asks the boy what he wants this time. The guy grabs her hand and pulls her to him, uncertainly asking the girl to be next to him. She does not expect this from him and almost falls off her feet, involuntarily leaning on him. The girl gloomily thinks that this guy never speaks first until she starts, and also that it is precisely because of his desire that the two of them cannot get closer to each other under any circumstances. The priestess rolls her eyes and pats the boy on the back with soothing phrases. She's here. She's not going anywhere. Everything is fine. About herself, she distantly thinks about when her coming out into the world will happen. The girl is thinking about leaving the service forever. And when did her life become like this? She recalls that all her problems began on the fateful day when she was entrusted with this very important mission. A respectable man in summer sits at the table. He is dressed in a luxurious priest's outfit with a massive cross and wishes the girl that God's blessing will always be with her. This is his usual greeting. The girl smiles and says that she is very happy to meet His Holiness, but her face is very far from the expression of sincere admiration and delight. She thinks that holiness is the highest rank in the temple. She mentally recalls that the hierarchy of the clergy of the Raklian Church is simple. 7 sons of God is the highest clergy. His Holiness presides over all existing temples, and His Holiness is the head of individual temples. But she herself is not in this hierarchy, and this hurts the girl. She is just an ordinary novice, one of hundreds of the same inexpressive girls who have no power and no will of their own in most matters. The main character's name is Daylin. When she was still very young and naive, filled with happiness and confidence that she was not worthy of the honor of serving in the temple as a novice, everything seemed magical. But the longer Daylin served at the temple, the more problems appeared in her life, and each day became worse than the previous one. In just 1 year of service, the girl became irritable and constantly irritated. With a fake smile, Daylin listens as Holiness says that it has been many years since she joined them on the path of service. She thinks she's been working like hell for 7 years. His Holiness smiles at Daylin, radiating a radiant aura, and says that she, having overcome all the difficulties on her way, has grown into a beautiful girl. Daylin thinks she's unlucky to be poor. Daylin joyfully thanks the Holiness and asks if he needs any help with great enthusiasm. She already knows that now some very difficult and unpleasant task will be assigned to her. It has already happened. Dalen thinks she's never given anything but dirty work. Even if she tries, there will be no promotion. At first she resisted, but then she realized that it was better to be quiet. His Holiness says that Dalen is immediately seen as a great role model. He smiles and says that the girl will help him a lot if she does one small task for him. Dalen continues to smile at Holiness, while inside she screams. She already knew that now she would be assigned some job, and she wants to do it perfectly to rub the noses of all those who doubt her. His Holiness joyfully says that all she needs to do is help the young gentleman who is suffering from the severe consequences of the war to return to life in society. Dalen is simply shocked by this assignment. Dalen mentally runs across the ceiling and screams at the top of his lungs. She does not want to undertake this task. She is just a novice who does not know anything about battles, wars, and besides, she is also very afraid of blood. His Holiness says that Dalen has been sent to the battlefield twice before, so she should be used to it. She clarifies whether this assignment is about simple treatment of a wounded person in the war. Only those who have been to war know how it poisons a person. In the midst of murder and blood, having lost their human form, the warriors change. The ministers of the church, of course, heal the body and soul of the soldiers, however. They treated them only until they were able to fight, without thinking about whether they would be able to live a normal life afterwards. And if the higher clergy of the church show interest in something, then money is involved. In addition, there are not enough people now, and if they send him an educated novice, then the matter is serious, and he is not an ordinary aristocrat. All these thoughts flash through Dalen's head. Dalen grimly realizes that it is God's help that she needs now. She is forced to undertake this task and fulfill it, because if she does not succeed, then she will only have to die ingloriously. Holiness says that it is necessary to extend a helping hand to someone who needs it. Dalen asks what will happen if she dies in the process. His Holiness smiles blissfully and says that God will grant her eternal happiness. Dalen can directly feel the Holiness dancing behind her, screaming that she will not go anywhere in the 7th year of slavery. She thinks that 7 years ago she would have agreed without even thinking, without question. Dalen asks Holiness in a different language what she will get in return. She thinks that no matter what favorable conditions he offers, she will not agree. If she just takes it, she will be used, and that's all. Dalen obediently folds her hands in front of her in submission while she dances within herself. If she does not agree, then His Holiness will have problems. He will have to offer a real reward. Holiness thinks that she will never learn humility. Dalen thinks no way, she can always just leave. The tension between them becomes almost physically palpable. Neither is going to give up. Novices themselves are forbidden to accept money. This is an iron rule. No matter how hard Dalen tried, no matter what she did, she could not become richer, because she has no right to receive anything as a reward. Dalen grew up in a temple and believed that this was the way it should be. She was grateful for food and a warm bed, and was ready for the sake of God to do everything, to give her all for the sake of His salvation and affection. As an adult, battered by life and repeatedly in danger on the battlefield, Dalen's outlook on the world has changed. If she barely survives and disappears, not a single soul will appreciate her efforts. Amidst the cries for help, the fires of war, she realized that people are born and die alone, such is life. And if that is the case, then she will definitely not allow herself to be led away and get out on her neck. Dalen stands before the Holiness with a humble posture, but a stubborn and firm gaze. She believes that if they want to use her, they should say so directly, otherwise she will just walk away. His Holiness clears his throat and says that he has watched Dalen for a long time and knows how talented she is, that he is very sorry that her efforts were not noticed earlier. Dalen's ear twitches at these words. His Holiness folds his hands, smiling, and says that if all goes well this time, everyone, even the higher clergy, will surely recognize her. Dalen merits. Dalen is beaming at what she heard. She thinks this means a promotion. There can be no mistake. If all goes well, she will get a place in the higher hierarchy after so many years of hard labor. Dalen thinks that she agrees on such terms, and says out loud that everything is God's will. She will go anywhere, because this is the command of His Holiness. Dalen asks for permission to start the task. His Holiness suddenly smiles a not at all pleasant smile and snaps his fingers. He says that after hearing these words from Dalen, he even believed that she would cope with this task. He asks Dalen to leave immediately and follow the orders of the two church thugs who appear behind her. Dalen questions whether it's really necessary to start right away, still enthralled by the promotion. The aura around the holiness becomes simply diabolical, and he says that the young master who needs Dalen's help is a victorious hero, a warrior from the 8th Squad called Berserk. Dalen, who is being held tightly by the arms, begins to realize what has happened, and she freezes in horror. The girl understands that the person to whom she is going kills indiscriminately both enemies and friends. Holiness smiles again and says that she will have to act alone. Such are the conditions. He wishes Dalen luck and says he really hopes to see her safe and sound again. Dalen screams for her to be left alone and to just leave the church service vanished into thin air along with the sympathetic and caustic laughter of the conniving priest. As it turned out that day, Dalen was caught in a cunningly laid trap that she wasn't sure she could handle. She ended up in a huge estate with a luxurious garden and a large area. And the most important thing is that she was trapped with a wild beast that does not know how to control itself at all. When he heard Dalen, he snarled like he was mad and looked around with a completely unkind look. Dalen is riding in a carriage that will take her to the estate of a young master. She is in despair. She thinks that she has only recently returned from the war, but she feels that life is dragging her back into her own hell. She sits in a carriage with one small suitcase of things and thinks that she has already seen so much in her life that she has no more tears. Dalen wants to cry, but she physically can't. Dalen decides to tell how the 8th Squad came to be. In the war between Reklion and the neighboring state of the Sorbonne, victory was on the side of the Sorbonne. The war was raging on an incredible scale. With each subsequent defeat, the morale of the Reklion troops fell, and no one even hoped for victory. The nuns of the church endlessly treated the seriously wounded without limbs. The war dragged on endlessly until they appeared, the 8th Squad. Dalen had seen them appear with her own eyes, and they looked more like wild beasts than disciplined soldiers. No one knew who they were and where they came from. A few selected fighters who fought as if possessed. It was their insane power that turned the tide of the war. They appeared out of nowhere, won the battle, and died. Allies called them saviors, and enemies called them demons. Dalen was very grateful to them, because when you think that God has abandoned you, you grab for anything. She just wanted this bloody war to end. But in one moment, everything changed. The soldiers of the detachment began to attack friendly soldiers, who could not oppose them. Rescuers began to be called rabid dogs, and the need for treatment grew. Dalen thinks this is unfair. Yes, they were really brutal in battle, but that's no reason to call them animals. After all, it was thanks to them that Reklion quickly won the victory over the Sorbonne. The second son of the emperor, the commander-in-chief, became a hero. The success of the war was credited to him, and the existence of the 8th Squad was erased, branding each member as a dangerous lunatic. Someone from the top of the aristocrats nevertheless decided, it is worth rewarding the participants with titles and lands, and not hiding them, and gave an order to the church to heal them and prepare them to be part of the Reklion nobility. Dalen thinks that it will take a dozen warriors to stop one such fighter. She just can't do it alone. She curses herself for agreeing so easily just for the promise of a reward. While Dalen thinks that she has to not only teach herself to behave like a human, but also to mold a noble lord from a warrior, someone speaks to her, breaking her thoughts. The guy is sitting right across from her. He smiles warmly at Dalen and says they'll be there soon, and also thanks her once again for agreeing to come and help the young gentleman. There is no falsehood or deceit in his words. Dalen laughs awkwardly and a little nervously, ashamed of herself for being lost in her own thoughts, even though she wasn't alone in the carriage. She replies that she is simply following the will of God, and it is nothing of the sort. The boy across from him is called Loren Thrak. He is the third son of House Thrak and a staff officer in the Reklion army. He appears friendly and sincere, an attractive young aristocrat. Loren is a very capable person, but after the war, he was left out of business, so now he is assigned the role of the one who will solve the problems of the unit. He says that despite God's will, it was not going to be an easy decision. Dalen does not respond to this provocation directly. She only says that this young master is from the 8th Squad after all, and therefore she will try her best to help him adapt. Loren says that she has faith in Dalen, that she will make it, even though she has to do everything on her own. He takes a whistle out of his pocket and hands it to Dalen and asks him to always keep it with him. Dalen takes the whistle with great surprise and asks why she has it. Lauren says it's a safety measure to be used in case of danger. The whistle was specially designed for reassurance. Dalen finally understands why the whistle is needed and wears it around his neck in gratitude. She thinks that she has repeatedly tried to guess how exactly the aristocracy made the 8th Squad obey. The carriage finally reaches the luxurious estate, and Lauren is happy to say that they have reached their destination after all. It is in this chic place that Dalen will live and help the young master. Lauren gives instructions. Servants will come from his estate, cleaning and laundry once a week, food delivered every other day, and if anything happens, security is always at the door. Dalen skeptically asks how the guards can help her, to which Lauren enthusiastically says that it's either clean up the body or die for the company. But she has to use the whistle. In a fit of desperation, Dalen asks if she can also move out for the night, but Lauren tells her that's impossible. At the same time, he had already jumped into the carriage that was taking him away from the estate. The carriage leaves, Dalen is left to stand in the middle of the road in despair, with security approaching behind her. They ask permission to take her luggage and welcome her to the world of working around the clock at the estate. Dalen refuses help with the luggage, because the suitcase is small and light, and security at least opens the door for her. They say that the master is in the White Hall at the end of the corridor and let her inside. Dalen looks around the vast, empty estate. She imagined that as soon as she entered, a wild animal would pounce on her, but everywhere was completely empty. Not that the animal, not even a small mouse. Moreover, the further she goes, the larger the estate seems to her. It seems to expand from her steps, and the absolute emptiness and silence make it even larger and grotesque. Dalen carefully opens the door to the next room and can't help but smile with satisfaction and happiness. The estate is simply luxurious. All rooms and even corridors are decorated with works of art. The girl remembers that before that, she lived in a tiny cell, and her own bed was more like a coffin. But everything around me was always very ascetic, cheap, and simple. She imagined that she would live in a terrible kennel next to a rabid dog, but she was surrounded by such luxury that the girl was even glad for such a turn of events. She cheerfully walks through the corridors with a song. Dalen dances, laughs happily, asks the imaginary audience to stand aside and not disturb such a radiant lady, and generally feels like a real princess. She even for a moment forgot about her task. Suddenly, her dancing and fun are interrupted. Dalen sees a young man in the middle of the room, sitting surrounded by debris and rubble. He picked up his legs, and an evil aura surrounded him. Pan starts to growl at her, clearly implying to get out of here, but Dalen fights back. She mentions that you can't show your fear to wild animals, because they feel it. The man's growl is getting louder. His eyes are full of hatred and the desire to kill. The veins on his neck and face are swollen. He is baring his teeth aggressively and ready to pounce on Dalen at any moment. Dalen tightens his grip on the whistle Lauren gave him and takes a few cautious steps forward, approaching the beast. She steps on shards of glass and wood that crunch under her feet. When the man sees Dalen walking towards him, his eyes widen and he changes his posture, jumping up on a crouch. He seems calmer, and Dalen tries to figure out if he's sane. She thinks that if this pile of muscles attacks, she's definitely a corpse. The man, meanwhile, really stops growling and looks as if he is ready to run away at any moment. Dalen thinks he's calmed down. Confused, Dalen decides that she should try to talk to him. She is obliged to understand how adequate this person is in a sober mind. As soon as she opens her mouth to say her name is Dalen, the man instantly attacks her by jumping into the air. Dalen barely manages to raise the whistle to her mouth, terrified and caught off guard. She seriously miscalculated that day. I thought that no matter what, this man still remains a person, but it turned out that everything is not so rosy and simple. Dalen blows his whistle as hard as she can, but she closes her eyes in terror and doesn't see a magical collar appear around the man's neck. He obviously hurts the man a lot. The man falls to the floor. He is unconscious. Dalen, who has no idea how the whistle works, looks at him with confusion and alarm. She didn't expect this turn of events. The girl anxiously looks from the whistle to the man and back in a circle. She does not understand what has happened. Maybe he just passed out, but it looks like he really fell because of her actions. Dalen quickly bends over the young man. She tries to shout to him and bring him to consciousness. The girl realizes with horror that he is not breathing and hopes that he is still alive. Suddenly, Dalen realizes that she is sitting next to the person who almost killed her. She quickly gets up and jumps away from her husband a few steps, pressing herself against the door. However, duty and many years of training as a healer prevail, and Dalen cautiously approaches the unconscious man. She walks step by step with trembling legs and constantly calls out to her husband. Dalen pokes the man with his finger, testing his reaction. She hopes that he is not pretending, waiting for the moment to attack, and thinks that if he is dead, then her mission can be considered complete. Suddenly, the girl's gaze falls on the man's neck. She is surprised at what she saw, because before there were no such marks on him, as if from a tightly tightened rope. Dalen remembers this perfectly. Dalen is horrified to realize that this could be the whistle's doing. She is amazed that the man lost consciousness and collapsed in pain, but did not make a sound. Only a drop of divine power remained in him. Dalen grimaces and thinks that the man looks like a hanged corpse right now, and it's a horrible sight. She decides not to use the whistle if possible and resolutely hides it under her clothes. It hurts the girl to look at how the man lies, all twisted, so she tries to put him more comfortably, at least on his back. In the process, she complains that it is unexpectedly very heavy. When the man is already lying on his back, Dalen is quite surprised to see that his head does not touch the floor. She understands that it is because of the incredibly strong back muscles, but this is the first time she has seen such a thing. Dalen quickly finds a pillow and places it under the man's head to rest his muscles. However, she tells him that she's only doing it because the pillow was nearby, and she's not that good in general. After he's done with the pillow, Dalen thinks things are bad because the man hasn't even moved in the process. However, she hopes that if he is snoring, then he is definitely alive and can rest. Dalen's gaze falls on the man's bare torso as she drags him across the floor in all directions. She sees more wounds. They look ordinary, but they are already too fresh in her opinion. Dalen thinks she's being too nice and getting into her own business again, but she can't help it. She resolutely sits on the man's hips and with one sharp movement opens his shirt, completely exposing his torso. The girl is fascinated by the muscles she sees, but at the same time she asks herself, was this body an instrument of murder or a washboard? Why is there no life on the man's place? There are continuous wounds and scars everywhere. Dalen conspiratorially tells the unconscious man that he will give him special favors solely as an apology, but that this must be kept between them. She begins to heal all his wounds with her power. Dalen says that she is really counting on the man to keep his mouth shut and not tell anyone about her stupidity. This seems to be how she calms herself down during treatment. As a child, Dalen noticed that her gift was special. She understood that there was no one to protect her and she could easily be used because of this gift, so she carefully hid it from everyone around her. It would have taken a normal church minister no less than half a day to heal such severe wounds, but she managed it in a few minutes, and at the same time, healed even the smallest scratches. Dalen thinks with satisfaction that now that the deed is done, she's craving something sweet. She hopes that if this estate is luxurious, then the food in it should be commensurately delicious. She is interested in what her ward eats, because even if he is an animal, he should not eat raw meat. Dalen says that somewhere there must be everything for this cute face, and these words wake the man up in an instant. Shocked by the fact that a girl is sitting on him, the man does not hesitate to sit down sharply. At the same time, he slams his head into Dalen's nose with all his might, and she falls back, until a fountain of blood flows from her nose. The girl involuntarily wonders if she is going to die, but the next moment she realizes that she is not, and now she is sitting across from the man with cotton swabs in her injured nose. The man looks offended at Dalen and pulls his shirt tighter. The girl shouts that she didn't do anything like that. She needed to take off her clothes for treatment, and there's no point in looking at her like that. The man looks away, confused and somewhat embarrassed, and Dalen exasperatedly yells at him to stop acting like he's missing something important. Dalen clutches the cotton swabs in her hand and thinks that despite everything, she's glad that his man's mind has returned to the point where he now feels shame. It can't help but please, and the nosebleeds have also stopped. The girl again reaches for the man with her magic. She says that the treatment is not finished yet. He should sit still for a while because it doesn't hurt. In response, the man jerks away in disbelief. However, Dalen ignores his behavior and moves closer to the man, continuing the treatment. He realizes with great surprise that she really helps him and does nothing wrong. Dalen is glad that the man has relaxed. She assumes that his outburst of anger was a sign of overexcitement because everyone in the pack was distinguished by animal sensitivities, and the sound of her footsteps could have provoked him. Dalen looks the man in the eye and asks if he can stand her voice. She's almost sure that with the help of divine power, she will be able to calm him down, and the girl mentally asks God for help. The man says very quietly that yes, he will be able to tolerate her. Dalen thinks that this dog knows how to endure, and that is worthy of praise. However, she wonders how long it will last. Dalen asks the man his name while he is still in treatment. He looks calm, does not take his eyes off the girl, and says just as quietly that his name is Keres. Dalen says it's a very nice name. She asks who gave it to Kelso, who says he doesn't know. The girl is surprised by this and realizes that the conversation somehow does not stick. However, what else did she expect? Dalen decides to ask Kelchi if he often lashes out at others like this. In response, Kels looks at her with a look full of misunderstanding, and the girl realizes that he did not understand the question. Trying to start a conversation, the girl's stomach rumbles, and at this sound, Kels instantly begins to growl, going into combat mode. Dalen realizes that he doesn't like that sound at all. Dalen unenthusiastically tells Kels that the treatment is over for today, but she'll be back. And right now she'd better go get something to eat so her stomach wouldn't make such disturbing noises. The girl makes another attempt to get closer. She asks Kels if he is hungry and would like something to eat. She would bring food for dinner together. Kels looks at her and only agrees in one word. Dalen notes that Kelchi doesn't say a word himself, but answers questions with yes or no. She gently asks him to wait on the couch while she goes down and brings the food. Kels once again agrees and obediently walks in the direction of the overturned couch. Dalen realizes with some satisfaction that he does everything she tells him, and it's nice. With a happy smile, she leaves the room and realizes that everything turned out better than she expected. She is tired of waiting for an attack, but if Kels is not provoked, he behaves meekly. Dalen gleefully sniffs at the wonderful aromas wafting all the way up here and is excited to think that dinner has even been prepared for them. This really cheers up the girl. Her eyes literally shine. Dalen sings as he heads for the source of the delicious smells and dreams that beef could smell like that. She hasn't tasted much in her life, so she can't know exactly what that smell is. A luxuriously dressed woman sits with a cup of tea at an elegant table. She says she's been told that the girl has already arrived at that estate and must have met Kels inside by now. A small boy is standing nearby, also dressed as an aristocrat. The woman asks him if he is also looking forward to the meeting, and little Sebian tells his mother that he is really looking forward to it. Mother and son dreamily look out the window. Next to them, they see someone else's boots, probably men's. They are very interested in what the hero from the 8th Squad will be like. Dalen watches in horror as Kels eats, how he injures himself in the process, and how angrily he smashes plates and scatters food around him, as if something is tormenting him. In the course of a simple dinner, Kels again injures his mouth and hands, flooding everything around with his own blood. How great is the malice and hatred surrounding him? Dalen screams in horror at what he saw. A beautiful woman looks out the window while the pigeons fly in all directions and says out loud that she is sure Sebian of Kels will make a wonderful person. She does not even doubt it. Horrified, Dalen rushes to Kels, immediately preparing to treat him. She is in despair because she does not understand where so much blood came from and feverishly asks if he is okay. The girl promises that she will definitely remove the poison from Kels's body, despite the fact that she has never done this before, and concentrates on the treatment. However, something is off, and Dalen sniffs around in confusion. With great relief, Dalen realizes that the liquid on Kelsey is just juice. She asks him if he spilled it because he was surprised, or if he choked because he was hungry and ate too quickly. It suddenly dawns on Dalen that she was screaming out of fear for Kels, and this couldn't end well. She tries to apologize, says that she was just scared, and she is very sorry for those sounds. Enraged by the noise, Kels begins to growl again and emit a murderous aura. Dalen is almost certain that this time he will kill her for sure. Kels grabs her shoulders with strong hands. Scared to death, Dalen folds her hands in a prayer gesture and mentally turns to God. She says she has a question she always wanted to ask right at the moment of her death. Dalen asks God if she'll get a severance package when her life is over, because she wouldn't mind dying for the money for a nice house in heaven. Kels squeezes her shoulder and says the word poison. Kels exhales, spits out the remaining juice from his mouth, and carelessly wipes his mouth with his hand. He tells the frightened Dalen in 3 words that all the food turned out to be poisoned. Fortunately, Kels was not affected by the poison, so he is perfectly fine. Dalen questions if he's really sure everything is fine, then asks how he found out about the poison. Kel says it tastes good. Dalen grimly thinks this is a real problem. She thanks God that she did not have time to eat a single piece of poisoned food. This was because Kelcha had started gobbling up everything in a row like a beast as soon as she returned. Dalen hopefully asks Kelcha if there really isn't anything she can eat, and gets confirmation from him. The girl is in despair because she hasn't eaten anything all day. Dalen's stomach continues to growl, and Kelsa is annoyed by the sound. She thinks that she will either starve to death, be poisoned, or be eaten by a hungry dog. Each of the options is simply incredible. Dalen thinks quickly, trying to stay calm, and finds a potential way out of the situation. She tells Kelcha not to worry and to trust her, because now she's going to show him something fantastic. Dalen rushes out of the hall, determined on her idea. Bewildered, Kels is left sitting on the floor, left alone. He is suspicious of the offer. Kels stares in disbelief after Dalen, who has gone off somewhere. However, even several rooms away, he hears her shout that everything is under control and she can do this. Dalen, meanwhile, confidently steps into the kitchen, where he is going to prepare dinner himself. She understands that flour, potatoes, and carrots must not contain any poison. They are completely safe. The security guard who brought all these supplies at Dalen's request questions her if this is really enough for dinner. He's surprised she didn't ask for any condiments, but Dalen just thanks him. The guard says he contacted Lord Lauren, so he will be at the estate soon. He asks Dalen to call him again as soon as she needs anything, and Dalen smiles back genuinely. The girl is not at all sure that she will succeed in anything. She can't even remember the last time she tried cooking. Her only experience is helping her parents around the house, even before she entered the temple. Dalen never thought that her childhood in a house without servants could be useful to her in life. She believes that soup is just a matter of chopping, mixing, and cooking, nothing complicated. Delighted, Dalen resolutely grabs the knife, confident that she won't be able to mess up such gorgeous ingredients, even if she messes up a lot in the process. The vegetables scream at her with horror that she is quite wrong. Towards evening, the carriage with Lauren arrives at the estate. Lauren gasps and rushes madly inside, sure that something terrible has happened. He opens the door and sees Dalen with a bowl in her hands. Terrified, Lauren starts screaming from the doorway. He asks Miss Dalen what the matter is. Someone on the edge of life and death again? Did Kels kill someone? Or God forbid Kels ran away from the estate? Enraged, Dalen immediately starts hissing at Lauren. She orders him to speak more quietly because Mr. Mad Dog is in a bad mood because he hasn't eaten anything yet today. Lauren apologizes feverishly. Dalen says there really is something important, but Lauren showed up a lot sooner than she expected. Since he was an aristocrat and a knight, she was sure he would show up in 3 days at the latest. Dalen says that if Kels had killed someone or died, she would have run, and she called Lauren because... At that moment, she sniffs and says that something is on fire, turns, and goes to the kitchen. Lauren follows her and leans closer to see what's going on. He sees a burnt bird in a frying pan and asks Dalen if she's interested in curses, but he says it's dinner. Lauren immediately excuses himself that he was wrong because the bird is too small and cute to be just dinner. Dalen says that small and cute is better than poison, and Kels catches her for dinner. Lauren can't believe her ears and asks Dalen if he didn't hear. She answers that she tried to cook something from the products that were in the estate, but suddenly, something unexpected happened. A few hours ago, Dalen carried the soup she had made to Kels. She thought that she had been messing with him for too long, and during that time, he could have gone wild again from hunger. It's a wonder he was calm all this time. Dalen with a tray enters the hall where Kels is left. She apologizes for the wait and says dinner is ready. She says she tried to make the soup, but she's not sure he'll like it. Kels stands silently at the window with a candlestick in his hand. Dalen thinks in surprise that he looks like a noble aristocrat, looking handsome even in this condition. But why does he need a candlestick? While Dalen thinks that in general, Kels can make his debut as a young master soon if he learns to control his tantrums, Kels instantly turns to the bird outside the window and kills it with a candle holder. After a dead pigeon with a candlestick inside falls epically into the manor yard through a broken window, a smug Kels turns to Dalen and says intently that it's food. Dalen is so stunned by this sight that she can't even say a word in response, and she can't even move. All her fleeting dreams about the young man are shattered in an instant, and so Dalen concludes his story to Lauren. She says she thought Kels wanted meat for dinner, so she's cooking everything from scratch. Lauren says it's cute, and he's so glad they got along. Lauren cools off Dalen's problems with the poison and Kelso and asks if she's sure he's really going to be the young master. He is very much looking forward to the day when Kels makes his debut as an aristocrat. Dalen excitedly asks if he left his conscience at home, and Lauren says that it's important for him to have a work-life balance. Dalen says he's jealous of him and asks to let him know when his conscience returns. Lauren reassuringly tells Dalen not to worry, as her progress in such a short period of time is truly impressive. He really hopes that she lives up to their expectations and achieves the ultimate goal. Lauren goes on to say that at this rate, there won't be any problems until the day Lady Charlotte comes to visit. Dalen freezes at these words and questions what Lauren just said. Dalen's hands are shaking. She asks again who exactly should come to this estate and Kels for a visit. Lauren scratches the back of her head nervously and says that he seems to have completely forgotten to tell Dalen something. Making the most innocent and delighted expression on her face, Lauren claps her hands and says that the imperial family, Lady Charlotte, and little Prince Sebian are coming to visit Kels. Lauren goes on to say that the imperial family is very interested in Kelcha, and Dalen feels the ground floating beneath her feet. At that moment, her whole life flashed before her eyes. There are many rumors about Miss Charlotte, and even more speculation about who she is and what role she plays in the socio-political structure of Raklion. The current Emperor Raklion had 2 wives. When the first empress died, the second became the emperor's mistress, Penelia. However, the emperor's love for Penelia did not last long, and soon the emperor fell in love with another woman. She became the charming Charlotte, whom people nicknamed the Third Empress. Despite the fact that the current empress is still alive, the emperor cherishes Charlotte and her young son Sebian very much. They are in the first place for him and feel like a real family. Dalen suggests imagining how Charlotte and Sebian come to see a rabid dog. Charlotte asks her son to say hello to the hero. The little boy greets loudly. Kels instantly goes crazy from his voice. Dalen says to stop now and begins to rebuke Lauren. The imperial family could not see Kels in the near future, and Lauren himself only asked who he killed. The girl begins to nervously bite her fingers and feverishly think about the worst. If something goes wrong, she will be held responsible and executed as the murderer of the imperial family by beheading. Lauren tells Dalen to calm down. He says that the emperor values his family very much, so they will come prepared for the meeting, with more security than the girl has ever dreamed of in her life. Dalen sighs tiredly and replies that she is not worried about the lives of the imperial family. No, of course, for them too. But the most important thing is not that. Lauren promises her that everything will work out and everything will be fine. But Lauren says she won't be able to protect her from the poisonous liquid she just made herself. Dalen bemusedly mentions the soup, which is really more like a potion in a wicked witch's cauldron than a meal. Lauren clarifies if she's going to feed it to Kels. Dalen concentrates on stirring the soup and says that it may not look good, but he can't keep eating the poison that was in every meal at the estate. Lauren sheepishly scratches the back of her head again and says with pent-up enthusiasm that it happens quite often. Dalen can't believe that he is reacting like this, as if there is nothing dangerous about it. Lauren comes closer and says that she's doing great. She's cooking. He promises to send fresh produce to the estate from caring farmers. And then he sees a soup that has a consciousness of its own. Lauren, in a fit of fear, picks up the pot and is about to pour its contents. Satan's spawn, into the trash. Dalen tries to stop him and yells that she has no more groceries. She can't do that. Dalen convinces Lauren to at least give it a try. Maybe this food tastes better than it looks. Lauren says that some things in the world are understood at first sight, and she would rather be feeding Kels poison already. Dalen cries and says that Kels wouldn't have died from the poison. But she did. It was to be her first meal of the day. Lauren says skeptically that she should just eat those potatoes raw. Lauren suddenly remembers that there's still that little bird, and Dalen better eat it. At that moment, the bird rises from the frying pan as an animated dark evil spirit, and the situation becomes even worse. Lauren insists that she will send groceries and a cookbook to the estate, but it must be thrown away. Dalen purses his lips and says it's still food, but Lauren flatly says it's an insult. Suddenly, the door opens with a powerful impact. Lauren, Dalen, and the dark food look over there in horror. In the doorway stands an evil-as-hell Kels, with an evil aura emanating from him. He says only one word: food. With a beastly snarl, Kels demands that he be fed immediately. Lauren and Dalen freeze in a stupor, but then the girl somehow pulls herself together and says that now she will put everything on the table. What should have been soup looks like purple jelly. Kels looks sternly at this misfortune, but in a moment he grabs the jelly with his hand, clenching it in a fist, and begins to eat, literally shoving it into his mouth. Lauren and Dalen watch in shock as Kels chews and eats it. They can't believe it's possible. Dalen musters up the courage to ask Kelsh if this food is okay for him. Kels nods his head firmly, swallows everything in his mouth as he cleans his plate, then reaches out to Dalen and tells her to bring him more of this food. Dalen can't believe his ears. Unlike Dalen, who is somehow used to Kels, Lauren is in real shock. He is suddenly filled with faith in God and thinks that, probably, God is really looking after Mrs. Dalen properly. Lauren turns to Kels, who is still chewing, and he says that there was poison in the food the cooks prepared yesterday and asks what it was. Kels routinely lists 2 ingredients that make up poisons. A very surprised Dalen, with a pan in her hands, asks Lauren if Kels can distinguish between poisons. Lauren says that the 8th Squad was trained to identify poisons and develop resistance to each. Dalen doesn't quite get the point with training. She asks if the acute hearing and sense of smell of the members of the 8th Squad is also a result of these trainings, because they are sharpened in them like real animals. Lauren says that the training enhanced her innate abilities. This is the result of raising children with excellent indicators. He heard that during training, they use spells and Dalen jumps at it. All invisible forces are considered divine and are controlled by the church. With the exception of battle priests, all others have the right to use these powers exclusively to save and heal people. Dalen believes that using spells to turn children into weapons is horrible and wrong. Puzzled, she asks Lauren if the church participated in these exercises. Lauren pauses for a moment, choosing her words carefully, then smiles and asks Dalen if she's sure she wants to know the answer. Dalen freezes. She does not know what to answer and is very nervous. The atmosphere is relieved by Kels, who suddenly grabs the edge of the pan and pulls it out of Dalen's hands, pushing it closer to him. He continues to eat this horrible concoction with pleasure, licking his fingers. Dalen shivers and says she doesn't care. The less you know, the better you sleep. She mentally tries to convince herself that there is nothing wrong with a well-known group abusing spells. Lauren smiles back and says that when raising children for the 8th Squad, no mistakes were made. And also, there is not a single loser among them. They are all perfect to the last. Lauren also says that it's hard to believe, but there are many ways to wipe a person off the face of the earth, as if they never existed. These words make their way into Dalen's heart. Lauren is still smiling when he says that he hopes for the best for the situation and believes in Dalen's abilities. However, now his smile and words no longer feel so kind. Dalen flinches as she wraps her arms around herself, her face contorted with terror. She enthusiastically says that of course everything will be fine, she won't let you down, and Lauren can count on her. Lauren leaves the estate late at night when Dalen has already changed into her pajamas and is getting ready for bed. She stands in her bedroom by the window and sends Lauren away with an unhappy look. Looking at Kels, who was eating the food she had prepared with great appetite, Dalen decided to give it a try. It turned out that it was really nothing better than poison, and she and Lauren felt sick. Unable to take this, and the general tension from Lauren's words, Dalen just ran off to her room to sleep, leaving Lauren with Kels. Lauren pleaded after her that he needed healing and blessing. Dalen flops down on his bed tiredly, and notes that at least it's very comfortable, and there are no surprises. She assumes that Kels fell asleep after dinner, which is why it's so quiet around here. Her eyes start to close. Dalen yawns deeply and tells himself that Kels doesn't matter right now. He is definitely not going to die, so she has to worry about herself. She adjusts the pillows and gets ready for bed. Happy Dalen thinks this bed is incredibly soft. She has never had such a wonderful and soft blanket in her life. After all, there must be at least something good in the situation in which she found herself. While Dalen is chirping happily to herself and hoping to sleep in late tomorrow, Kels suddenly appears at her bedside. He growls displeasedly, scaring the girl, and she does not understand what the reason is. Be that as it may, Dalen already feels much more confident around the aggressive Kels. She rummages quietly under her pillows and pulls out a whistle, ready to use it at any moment. When Kels sees the whistle, he flinches and immediately loses his fighting spirit. Now he looks more like a beaten puppy. Dalen is very happy that it worked, and Kels is afraid of the whistle. Dalen exhales a little and really hopes that the demonstration will be enough, She really doesn't want to use the whistle again. The girl takes a deep breath and asks Kels what is wrong, why he is angry. Kels says in exasperation that it's too loud for him. Dalen doesn't understand what he's asking about. Kels says that her voice, her steps, her breathing, all this is very loud and does not allow him to sleep peacefully. Dalen is surprised that Kels managed to explain the reason to her and begins to make excuses. She is very excited because she has never slept on such a bed and promises to be quieter if Kels returns to herself. Suddenly, the girl realizes that her and Kels's bedrooms are on different floors and at different ends of the huge estate. It's a very long distance to hear anything. She stares at Kels and checks if he actually heard her footsteps and breathing right from his room. Annoyed, Kels confirms that yes, it's too loud and unbearable for him. Dalen remembers Lauren's words about training and heightened feelings. She knew Kelchi was sensitive, but this was too much. The girl is sure that this is a consequence of using spells on small children. Dalen asks Kelch if he can go to his place and go to bed if she asks. However, she herself sees from his facial expression and posture that this is an impossible task, no matter how much she asks. Dalen sighs and sits down on the bed. She realizes that she will not be able to sleep now either, and therefore suggests that they just chat. The girl assumes that if they relax a little, they will want to sleep again. Dalen asks Kels to sit at the small table while she makes him some tea. She moves a chair for him, and Kels obediently heads in the indicated direction without visible signs of aggression. Kels sits down in a chair, his back as straight as a stick. Dalen admires how straight he sits, like a museum piece. She wonders where he learned to hold his posture so skillfully. The girl sees that there is still some tea left in the teapot on the table, which she brewed for herself earlier. However, it's already overcooked, so she thinks maybe she should make a new one in the kitchen. And in a moment, she decides that she does not care about such trifles. Dalen asks Kels not to be surprised and picks up the kettle. The next second, the kettle begins to heat up from the magic, and Kels stares. Kels asks Dalen if she's a battle priest, and she calmly tells him no and gracefully pours hot tea into the mugs again. Priests are divided into several types. Ordinary priests take up positions in churches immediately after ordinary theological training. Born priests are born with divine power without the intervention of the church. The church finds them and makes them priests, developing their gift. And the last, combat priests, who have special, unique divine powers compared to ordinary priests and take part in battles. Usually, the divine power is the power of healing, but sometimes it can manifest as telekinesis or fire magic. A priest with such powers becomes a combatant and, without exception, goes to the front. Their ability is actually a faster cannon or bowfire, but they gain popularity and promotion quickly. The problem is that Dalen doesn't want to die and keeps his power a secret. After these words, Kels looks thoughtfully into his cup of tea. Dalen doesn't think he'll tell anyone, but sharing a secret is the fastest way to bond. Kels pours the entire cup into his mouth in one gulp as Dalen yells at him to stop. Of course, he burns his throat, and Dalen has to treat him on the spot, while reading the notations that this is not possible. She pours Kels a second mug and tells him he'll relax when he warms up, but he should drink slowly. Dalen instructs Kels. Drink slowly, sip by sip, enjoy the aroma. Kels drinks, and Dalen thinks she was just an ordinary novice until her godlike powers awakened. However, this only led to an increase in the load. She doubts that a special power would help. Dalen thinks that if you look at Kels, he went through all this training and risked his life fighting in the war, and in fact, he was left with. Here the girl's thoughts switch to the sexual body. Dalen realizes that she has been taken somewhere wrong and slaps her cheeks in confusion, trying to concentrate. Kels looks surprised at such a sudden change in behavior. The girl quickly excuses herself. She says that it's nothing like that. She was just thinking because it was too dark. Dalen lights the candle with magic and asks Kelchi if he minds if she does. Kelchi instantly jerks away from the fire, and Dalen belatedly thinks she shouldn't have started the fire if it's that sensitive. She asks Kels if he should blow out the candle, but he only takes a sip of his tea. Dalen asks Kelchi if he's feeling better, as he looks a lot more relaxed now than when he first came into her room. Kelchi says yes, a little, and Dalen lets out a sigh of relief. Kel slowly drinks his tea, while Dalen asks him if he can hear anything else besides her voice. Kels hears the jumping of 3 birds, 5 mice, the change of guards at the main gate outside the window. Dalen is shocked. Kelcha says he's been training for it, but Dalen thinks it's too much. If you start hearing all this, you can go crazy. Now she understands why he was so angry and came to her at night. Dallin naively thinks that maybe Kelso will feel better if she covers his ears, and she reaches forward with her hands, trying to make her idea come true. This movement makes Kels instantly mad and growls. To him, it looks like a threat. Dallin quickly pulls her hands away and curses herself for not being able to learn to think with her head at all. Dallin puts on an incredibly enthusiastic persona and says that she will definitely help Kelcha. She is convinced that there is another way to improve Kelcha's condition, and it is her duty to find it. Dallin leads the dialogue, asking Kels what he usually does. He simply answers that with training, sleep, and food. Dallin has to literally force every word out of him. In the morning, the birds are singing happily outside the window, and Dallin is sitting on the bed, looking as if she died and was brought back to life. Apparently, she never slept that night. At night, he and Kels had a little chat, and it helped him finally calm down. Dallin asked him with divine power and sent him back to bed. He must have been fast asleep because he didn't come again, but Dallin couldn't sleep anymore. She stared at the ceiling with glassy eyes all night, aware that Kelcha could hear her every breath and it might make him uncomfortable. Dallin laments that first she had to worry about being poisoned for being with Kels, and now she has to worry about her breathing too loudly in her sleep, and it's unbearable. The girl suddenly shuts her mouth, because if Kels wasn't asleep, he could hear her now and run to growl. She tries to carefully get out of bed and go to the kitchen to prepare breakfast, very quietly. Suddenly, Dallin hears loud voices outside the window. People with boxes in their hands wonder who lives in such a wasteland and why such a large estate. Dallin is horrified. Haven't they been told to be quiet? The men continue to speculate about the owner of the estate and consider hiring, while Dallin, from the window, thinks about how to tell them to keep quiet. One man tells the other that it's a bad idea to take a job here, because certain places have to keep their secrets, and the other agrees. Kels is sitting above them on a branch at this time. The men suddenly turn around. One of them asks the other if he hears the growling of some predatory animal nearby. At that moment, Kels jumps out of a tree at them, and Dallin yells at him to stop. The two men apparently decided they could ignore their employer's warnings to keep quiet. Lauren warned them about it, but they didn't take his words seriously. When Lauren is asked if he thinks these two will be up to the task, he says yes, if they take his words seriously. If not, then only 2 additional corpses will appear for cleaning. However, Lauren believes that even if the 2 men do survive this, they will still need to be removed for safety. The men look on in shock as Kelshi rushes towards them. Suddenly, there is a loud bang. The window opens. Yelling for Kelsh to stop, Dallin falls out of the window. She didn't expect such a jump from herself, and now curses herself with an expression of horror. While Dallin thinks she could have just blown the whistle and not even gotten out of the window, Kels already realizes that she's going to fall and at least get injured. So she rushes forward, ignoring the men. No matter how incredible Kels's reflexes were, and even he didn't manage to catch Dallin perfectly, she rather fell on top of him. However, the main goal was achieved. The girl was not injured. The gasping men immediately jumped closer to Dallin and Kels and began rehearsing. They asked again and again if the young lady was okay, why she jumped out of the window, and who this mysterious man was. Annoyed by their behavior, Dallin jumps up and yells if the two have forgotten everything they were warned about. They must immediately flee, get out of here and not make a sound, disappear. One of the men says puzzled that whoever Dallin is, they're here to deliver those boxes to the door. That's the job they signed up for and have to do, so they can't run. Dallin freaks out and yells that it's for their own good. They need to get out now if they don't want to die. Kels is already very aggressive and starts growling viciously at the men in front of him. Only now do the men notice Kels. They quickly realize that the young lady is right, and they run away just to see them. In the process, the men shout that they have realized the value of their own lives. Dallin and Kelch are finally left in silence. Dallin sighs tiredly and is glad that these two finally obeyed and left. And he is even more glad that Kels restrained himself and did not kill them on the spot. Dallin suddenly has hope that the rabid dog has calmed down after catching her. She turns to Kels and somewhat awkwardly thanks him for saving her from falling out of the window. However, Kelchi is still in an aggressive state. Dallin speculates that he might have reflexively caught something that was falling. She clings to Kelcha and begs him to calm down, to let these two go this time. Kelcha doesn't respond, and Dallin realizes he can't hear her. She thinks that she should try to use the whistle, but at that moment she hears something strange. Kels's heart is beating wildly. He is alarmed. Dalen takes a step back and tells Kelce it's okay. These two men just brought the food. They are not a threat and have already gone away. They will not bother you again. Kels calms down. Dalen is happy about it. After all, Kels is just a person with heightened feelings. In addition, he spent a lot of time on the battlefield, and then they constantly tried to poison him. It's no wonder that anything unfamiliar seems like a threat to Kels. He would be dead if he didn't react immediately when he senses danger, and that's how he lived for many years from his childhood to the present. Dalen realizes that her main task is to teach this killing machine to live in peacetime. She decides that she will only treat Kelce as a human in order to teach him to be human. Dalen smiles genuinely as he heads towards the manor with Kels. She says he's done a great job of keeping his murderous streak in check, and then she offers to go inside and heal his scars. In any case, Dalen is very proud of herself. She managed to find a way out of a potentially dangerous and unusual situation. But there is something that does not give the girl peace all this time. Yawning guards walk out of the estate, stretching. One scolds the other that he just started working as a security guard. How did he even manage to sleep through the beginning of the morning shift? Dalen calls out loudly to the guards as he stands in front of them, and the guards' expressions instantly change. Dalen sweetly asks them if they got a good night's sleep, which doesn't bode well. In the end, Dalen sternly and emotionally explained to the two what had just happened in the yard. The guards were terrified. They didn't even hear anything. They offered the girl their most sincere apologies. Dalen takes Kels into the house, to his rooms, and asks him to lie down on the bed for treatment. Kelce stares at the bed in silence, not moving, and Dalen realizes something is wrong. She brings Kels to the bed herself, spreads the sheet, knocks down the pillows, and asks again. Surprisingly, this time everything works, and Kels obediently lies on the bed, face up on his back. Dalen says she's going to treat Kelce's back today, so she asks him to roll over on his stomach. She uses the gesture, and it gives a great result. The girl remembers to use them. Kels lies flat as a log and mumbles through the pillow, which is uncomfortable for him. Dalen is surprised at first, then realizes what's going on, and gently turns his head to the side so Kelce can breathe. Dalen starts treatment, and Kelce says again that he's uncomfortable. While the girl wonders what else could be wrong, Kels is silent for a while, and then says that only the floor is comfortable for him. Dalen smiles. She finally understands. She says that Kels must not be used to a soft bed. That's because he doesn't sleep on it much. He will definitely be much more comfortable once he gets used to it. Dalen continues his treatment while teaching Kels. She says this isn't a battlefield. He doesn't need to be on guard all the time. When his body becomes softer and more relaxed, this is a state of comfort. Dalen asks him to learn to catch this condition, to get used to it, and Kels nods in response. Dalen thinks Kelce doesn't answer the hard questions, and she'll have to fix that as well. Dalen thinks, what is being a young master anyway? All the aristocrats she'd ever seen and met were downright disgusting scum bent on pleasure and money. Dalen sighs and hopes that she doesn't have to turn Kelce into someone like that. She definitely can't handle that. Probably you mean a small, sweet, and kind person whom all girls dream of. Kelce falls asleep relaxed, inspiring Dalen to succeed. She understands that there is still a long way to go, but she will not rush. After all, starting with sleeping in bed is better than nothing. Dalen finishes her treatment, and Kelce continues to sleep, so this is a great opportunity for her. She goes into the kitchen, ties up her hair with a ribbon, and decides it's time to feed that mountain of muscle. At the same moment, Kelce appears nearby. He is going to help Dalen with cooking. In the girl's imagination, he looks like a big baby, with a nipple in his mouth and a bib. However, the shirt is really new. Dalen tells Kelce they can start. She didn't think he'd wake up so soon, but he's in a good mood, and she thinks he'll help check the food for poison. Dalen is a little embarrassed that she's going to use Kelce as a search dog because she's supposed to make him an aristocrat, but she uses all opportunities to simply survive in this estate. The girl alternately gives Kelce a sniff of an onion and a carrot. He confidently says that there is no poison either there or there. Dalen is very happy about this because she was afraid that the poison might be in the new products. Having made sure of the safety of the products, Dalen begins to think about what exactly she should cook. She understands that the guards brought more boxes that those men did not bring, and therefore they have enough products. One of the drawers is completely filled with various cookbooks. Dalen is delighted. She thinks Lord Lauren is very caring to send so many different books at once. Dalen enthusiastically picks up the top book and flips through it to find something interesting. In just a few seconds, she slams the book shut in confusion because she doesn't understand anything. The girl is very surprised. Why the words do not seem familiar to her? Perhaps this book is written in a foreign language? It is very surprising because she can read and writes explanatory notes to the church leadership perfectly. Keres leans into the book with interest. Dalen is glad that he is interested and suggests that the man take a closer look. She opens the book, and Keres just bends even lower, sniffs, and says that there is no poison. Dalen realizes that Kelchi was just doing his job. It's a bit disappointing, but she puts the book in Kelso's hands and asks him to try looking at the contents of the book instead of sniffing. Kels looks up at the book with a shudder, and suddenly a terrible truth dawns on Dalen. She is surprised that they were trained so much, but not taught to read. Kels says that reading is not necessary for combat. Dalen angrily wonders how they could raise children like this in the first place. Who even decided this was a good idea? She is interested because she is currently dealing with the consequences. Dalen sighs and tells Kelchi that it looks like she's going to have to teach him to read. Kels questions. He does not understand the girl. Dalen confirms, and Kelchi just keeps silent in response. Dalen sees that Kelch is not saying anything, but he is not angry. Is he thinking this way? She guesses that he's only been saying yes and no before, so he doesn't know what he likes. Dalen thinks she needs to teach him to deal with his feelings now, in addition to reading and sleeping in bed. She says out loud that all aristocrats can read, so he will learn. However, the girl notes that Kels will not be able to become a master if he dies of hunger, and therefore she needs to feed him first. This kills her enthusiasm because she still doesn't understand the cookbook. Dalen reads that first you need to cut the onion and carrot into small pieces. She absent-mindedly asks Kels if he knows what that means. Kels says he knows what it's like to cut into small pieces. Dalen is surprised, but quickly realizes that they were trained to process humans, so it makes some sense. She puts the book away, points out the onions and carrots to Kels, and offers to try them if he wants. Kels looks at the vegetables in silence, then quickly grabs the knife in his hand. He instantly goes into aggressive mode, and Dalen nearby is scared to death by his appearance. Dalen curses herself mentally. She has managed to forget that this man was a human weapon. She told him that this was not a battlefield, and then put the damn knife in her hands. Dalen sweats in terror and thinks she needs to stay away. We need to get ready to run from here. Who cares about vegetables? For a girl, her life comes first. Kels gets to work. He cuts vegetables into smaller and smaller pieces, showing incredible techniques. Dalen is delighted. She thinks she has glimpsed the future of humanity in these techniques. The girl thinks that cutting into small pieces is not for everyone. Kels happily tells her it's ready, his voice snapping Dalen out of her thoughts. Dalen tells Kels that his work was a sight to behold. She leans closer to the table because she wants to take a closer look at how exactly he managed the vegetables. Vegetables are more like puree, pureed in a blender. Dalen wasn't expecting that. She says that Kels did cut the onions and carrots into very small pieces, but the book probably didn't mean that. Dalen asks if Kels has used these skills on anything else before. Kels grumpily says that of course he did. Captives, torture, bodies of enemies and all that. Dalen stares at him in a daze for a few seconds. She doesn't even try to comprehend what she's heard. Instead, she folds her hands in a prayer gesture and prays for the peace of the onion and carrot sisters. Dalen decides it's better not to think at all. Better to just focus on feeding yourself and not worry. The recipe continues. You need to cut the meat and add oil to the pan. Dalen asks the gods to just get through this day. She doesn't need anything else. However, together with Kels, they skillfully cook according to the recipe, and the final result is really pleasing to the eye. Ready stew not only looks very tasty, but also has a wonderful aroma. Nothing to do with the horrible jelly from yesterday. Happy Dalen thinks she hasn't smelled anything like this in a long time. The girl looks at Kels and thinks that everything turned out so great only because he helped her. Before, she had no idea that it takes so much dexterity, endurance, and strength to manage in the kitchen. Delighted, Dalen turns to Kels and asks him what he thinks about cooking. Was it okay for him to do it? Kels calmly replies that it wasn't hard work. Dalen sighs to himself and realizes that he needs to ask differently. She asks if Kelso had fun in the process. Kelcha frowns, clearly not understanding what Dalen means by fun. Dalen wonders how she's going to explain to Kelso what fun even means. She asks if he enjoyed cooking. However, she is sure that Kels only did it because she told him to. Dalen asks if Kelchi wants to help anymore. He asks if more help is needed. The girl says that if he wants to, he doesn't have to do it. Keres is shocked by her words. How unnecessary. Dalen smiles broadly and says it's okay. She'll be able to come up with something else. After all, she has every chance of getting better at cooking once she's practiced it enough. Keres, with passion in his eyes, presses his hand to his heart and says what he wants. That he would definitely help Dalen again. The girl thinks that this is all because of yesterday's terrible meal and that he is a traitor. Dalen says she'll look forward to his next dish, but somehow she doesn't feel satisfied. And she doesn't understand why, because Keres really said sincerely that he liked cooking. Anyway, Dalen thanks Keres for his help and asks to bring the stew to the table while she sets the table for two. She does not forget to remind him to use gloves so as not to burn his hands with the pan. The stew was very tasty, despite the slightly bitter aftertaste, and Keres' socialization began. However, there was one problem that they could not solve even after learning to talk. Dalen took turns calling Keres different things: soup, bed, spinach, and so on, and he answered whether he liked the name or not. At some point, the girl decided to ask if he liked her. Keres says straight up that he doesn't like Dalen. His words hurt the girl to the very heart. She clenches her fist and thinks that Keres is a real ill-mannered, rude dog. Dalen thinks it's hopeless. How can Keres answer so quickly without thinking? Even dogs show their love to those who care about them, and this one. And how can a person be like that? Dalen makes another desperate attempt. She directly asks Keres why he doesn't like her. In return, she receives a short, sincere answer. She is too loud. Dalen screams in surprise. She didn't expect to hear that. The next moment, she closes her mouth and thinks she understands why Keres thinks she's loud. She really is very emotional. In addition, Dalen has been on the verge of death several times in her sleep because she snored and ground her teeth every night in her sleep. But she can't stay asleep, and her sleep is disturbing due to constant fatigue. Dalen tries to justify himself to Keres. She waves her hands and chatters that she doesn't snore and grind her teeth as much lately. Keres replies that she is loud. Dejected, Dalen thinks Keres is learning to adapt pretty quickly, but she's still confused about his heightened sensitivity to literally everything around him. Keres looks totally ready to make his debut in the higher world. Judging by the way he cuts and eats his steak, it's very elegant. But in everything else, it is a disaster. The fact that he learned to tolerate sounds more easily does not mean that they no longer annoy him. He can barely stand the sounds Dalen makes in this quiet estate. He won't stand the ball anyway. Dalen asks how breathing could be bothering Keres. She is not his enemy, and he remembers that. She doesn't walk around with a knife in her pocket. She doesn't try to cut his throat. Keres replies that she is loud. The girl says that she needs to breathe to live. This is logical. In response, Keres says with one eye that in that case, she'd rather just die. The silence at this moment is very frightening and stressful. Desperately, Dalen asks about the kittens if Keres doesn't like them too. He says no. Puppies? Birds? Sheep? Cows? Pigs? Keres doesn't like any of what Dalen lists. Dalen wearily asks if Keres just hates all living things. He is silent for a few seconds, and then confirms that he does not like it. Dalen is just killed by this answer. Offended, the girl says that it's okay. Keres might not like anything if he's so weird. She takes a full chest of air and says that from now on, she will not breathe at all. Dalen still hopes in her mind that sooner or later, but one day she will wait for Keres to say that he likes her. A wind suddenly blows outside the window, causing the tree near the window to shake and rustle. Keres just looks at him, but does not go into aggressive mode and does not growl at everything around him. One leaf flies into the room, and Keres automatically catches it. Still offended, Dalen tells him a little skeptically that it's a leaf. He's not going to fight with the leaf, is he? Keres's heart races, but he holds himself in check. Dalen says he has to remember to calm down. Keres takes a few deep breaths in and out like she taught him. Keres thinks that this woman always makes noises when she moves or is fast asleep, but he feels something with her that he has never felt before. Rest. This peace is different from the one imposed on him by spells and drugs on the battlefield. Not at all like the feeling when everything was taken from him and thrown into an endless void.